What happens when America's country music queen comes face to face with late night television's golden boy, and a simple interview turns into the most explosive television moment of the year? Tonight, we're diving deep into the shocking confrontation that had millions of viewers glued to their screens and left the entire entertainment industry buzzing. Before we get started, make sure to hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below, telling me what you think really caused this heated exchange. Trust me, you're not going to want to miss a single word of what went down. The Tonight Show starring Jimmy Fallon was supposed to be just another routine promotional stop. Reba McEntire, country legend, cultural icon, and universally beloved entertainer, was scheduled to talk about her newest album, share a few stories, maybe play along with Jimmy's goofy games. Everything was set for a light, fun, feel-good segment that fans had come to expect from her appearances. The audience was buzzing, cameras were rolling, and the stage glowed under the familiar studio lights. Jimmy introduced her with his trademark high-energy charm, shouting her name above the roaring applause. Reba stepped out in a stunning burgundy dress that shimmered as she waved to the crowd. Her hair was perfectly styled, her smile warm and confident. She looked every bit the queen she's known to be. She took a seat, exchanged greetings with Jimmy, and settled in as he praised her new album with enthusiasm. For a moment, everything felt normal. Reba talked about storytelling, authenticity, and staying connected to her fans through music that speaks from the heart. Jimmy nodded along until he shifted gears. A seemingly harmless question about political opinions in country music sent a subtle ripple of tension through the air. Reba answered with grace, reaffirming her belief that music should unite people, not divide them. But Jimmy didn't let it go. He pressed her further, insisting that artists have a responsibility to speak out on certain issues. The audience felt it before Reba even reacted. Something in the air changed. Her smile faded ever so slightly. Her posture straightened. She chose her words carefully, emphasizing respect for her fans' intelligence and personal freedoms. Still, Jimmy pushed. He leaned into topics about responsibility, influence, moral obligations. Reba remained composed, but each question dug a little deeper, becoming sharper, more pointed. By the time Jimmy suggested her neutrality was a form of privilege, the temperature on that stage shifted from warm banter to simmering conflict. The audience sensed it. Jimmy didn't. And Reba's patience, legendary though it was, had finally begun to wear thin. The silence after Jimmy's remark about privilege hung in the air, like a spark waiting for something to ignite. Reba looked at him, not with anger at first, but with a kind of cool warning that only a seasoned entertainer could master. It was the kind of look that said she'd been pushed before, but rarely this clumsily, and certainly not on national television. Jimmy, still smiling nervously, tried to move forward as though nothing was wrong. But the atmosphere in Studio 6B had already changed. Reba answered with composure, explaining that telling people how to think wasn't part of her job. Her fans, millions of them, came to her music for comfort, connection, and escape, not political lectures. Jimmy nodded, but rather than honoring her perspective, he pushed the topic even further. He framed her approach as avoidance, implying she was sidestepping her moral responsibilities. The audience shifted in their seats. Even viewers at home would later say they could feel the tension through the screen. When he suggested that staying neutral could be seen as cowardice, the crack finally appeared. Reba's expression hardened. Her voice, calm but cutting, was no longer the warm tone fans were used to. It carried authority, experience, and the unmistakable sting of someone who had been pushed too far. She reminded Jimmy that silence could be wisdom, that her job wasn't to divide people, but to bring them together. And she made it clear that forcing political litmus tests onto entertainers wasn't helpful or respectful. But Jimmy kept going, insisting that some issues were black and white, that in the modern world, neutrality wasn't acceptable. Reba's patience snapped, not loudly, not dramatically, but with deadly precision. She told him he was oversimplifying complex issues that affect real people with real struggles far outside the New York studio bubble. Jimmy tried to keep it light, but his attempts to laugh off her comments came across as dismissive. He insisted he talked to people from all walks of life. The audience didn't buy it, and neither did Reba. Her frustration shifted into something sharper. She told Jimmy that his show was becoming an echo chamber, that he and his team mocked half the country without realizing the damage it caused. Jimmy shot back that they mocked everyone equally, but his tone sounded defensive. Reba wasn't convinced. Her voice rose, not in anger, but in clarity, as she described the disconnect between Hollywood entertainment and the people her music had always spoken to. Jimmy looked uncomfortable, but he wasn't ready to back down. And Reba, now fully engaged, wasn't about to let him twist her values or intentions. By this point, the energy in the studio had shifted from awkward to volatile. Jimmy's attempts to regain control were slipping through his fingers as he continued trying to frame Reba's refusal to discuss politics as a flaw. Instead of de-escalating, he questioned whether she truly understood the impact of her influence. It was the kind of comment that might have worked with a younger, less experienced guest. But Reba McEntire had been navigating the entertainment industry longer than Jimmy had been on television. Reba reminded him of that, firmly. She recounted how she'd faced intense scrutiny over the decades, handling the press through her personal struggles, career shifts, and unexpected tragedies. She told him that tough questions were nothing new to her. He countered by saying that if she could handle them, she should answer them. The audience gasped. Jimmy didn't seem to realize his misstep. When Reba pointed out that his issues that matter were simply the concerns of people in his own bubble, Jimmy pushed again. He insisted these issues mattered to the American people. That phrase struck a nerve. Reba responded with biting precision, telling him he did not speak for the American people, certainly not the farmers, factory workers, small business owners, and families she'd met throughout her career. Jimmy, visibly rattled now, accused her of being disrespectful to him and to the show. Reba laughed, a cold, humorless sound. She pointed out that he had invited her under false pretenses, then spent the interview cornering her, mischaracterizing her beliefs, and undermining her integrity. Jimmy insisted she was overreacting. That word, overreacting, landed like a spark in dry grass. Reba's voice dropped to a dangerous calm as she repeated his words back to him. The tension spiked. Jimmy tried to recover, saying they needed to calm down. But the moment he said it, the entire room froze. Telling a woman, especially a woman like Reba, to calm down was an unforgivable mistake. She'd heard those words before from men who doubted her intelligence, her grit, or her place in a male-dominated industry. Her response was measured but lethal. She asked Jimmy if he truly understood what he'd just said, if he realized how demeaning it sounded. She laid out, point by point, the ways he had dismissed her perspective, while framing his own as the only morally correct one. Each sentence was sharper than the last, each word carrying decades of earned authority. Jimmy tried to soften the blow, but nothing he said worked. Reba was now fully in command of the room. Reba rose from her chair, not in anger, but with the presence of someone who had been pushed past her limit and chosen dignity over chaos. Standing tall beside Jimmy's desk, she delivered a calm but devastating assessment of the interview's collapse. She told him that his job was to entertain, to bring people together with humor, heart, and joy. That late-night television was supposed to give viewers a moment of relief from the world's troubles, not amplify them, and certainly not turn artists into political targets. Jimmy pushed back weakly, insisting he wasn't bullying her and that his questions were legitimate. Reba countered immediately, pointing out that he wasn't listening. He was lecturing, that he had framed her perspective as ignorance, simply because it didn't align with his. The audience remained silent as every word echoed off the studio walls. She reminded him that people across the country, people who didn't live in big cities or work in entertainment, had different values and priorities, and that dismissing them was part of the nation's growing divide. Jimmy tried to defend himself, pointing out that she didn't know anything about his background, but the way he said it sounded more like a plea than a defense. Reba stepped back, took a breath, and said something that stunned everyone. She accused him of looking down on the people who made up the core of her fan base. People who worked long hours, who faced real struggles, who didn't have the security or comforts that he and his team enjoyed. She wasn't angry for herself, she was angry for them. Jimmy tried one last time to salvage the interview, suggesting they move on and talk about her tour. But the tone was all wrong, patronizing, careless, almost dismissive. That attempt sealed his fate. Reba looked at him with pure disappointment. As if she finally understood that the conversation could not be repaired, she called out his patronizing apology, repeating his phrase about good television with a mix of disbelief and contempt. If ambushing guests and dismissing their concerns was his idea of good content, she said, then maybe the industry had lost its way. Jimmy insisted he hadn't ambushed her, but his words felt small, irrelevant. Reba explained that real conversations required respect, understanding, and humility, none of which he had shown tonight. With the cameras still rolling, Reba gathered herself, thanked the audience, and walked off the stage before Jimmy could get another word out. The studio erupted, not in applause, but in stunned whispers. Producers scrambled, Jimmy sat frozen behind his desk, and millions of viewers watched as a late-night legend experienced the most disastrous interview of his career. And just like that, the queen of country music had left her mark, powerful, unfiltered, and unforgettable.